Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We'll kick off the meeting of the New London Housing Commission. It's Tuesday, November 18th, a little after 2:30. Sorry for the delay. The agenda today, as we like to do, establishes governance where we are. We have enough members to vote if we need to, but I don't think we'll be doing any major voting. I also want to welcome Kathy Weber in person. She was joining us before electronically and now in person. So thank you, welcome. We have lots of good work to do together. The work session debriefing I put first on the agenda, just sort of any soft thoughts, responses, how things are going. Was it what you expected? Any comments you thought that were made you wanted to reflect on? What do you think?
How big was the turnout? I'm sorry, because I wasn't here.
Did you?
And can you use the mic? Oh, maybe. Oh, thanks. Thank you. How big was the turnout for the meeting?
Talking about the
October
work session?
31st.
You're talking about the work session, right?
No, I think she
No.
means the third forum.
Yes,
Right.
the third forum. I'm going backwards for a couple to get myself
So
right.
I think there were two
Because
empty
I've heard a lot of
chairs, if I
feedback from that.
remember right. And
It was set up somewhat like this, and there were maybe a little bit more chairs,
I think
and-
all of the chairs were out.
and there were just a few empty ones, so maybe 70.
Well, because I did hear in my travels, I've heard a lot about it. So there's confusion definitely over the different types of things that were discussed. So then I was thinking about the work session, thinking, I guess the confusion was if the zoning were to be changed, do we have to put only that type of housing there? They were confused about that. Everybody that I spoke with agrees we need workforce housing. They now understand the difference between workforce and affordable. Maybe, but most of them did. And they really liked the institutional thought. That they got pretty clearly. What was the other one that was, the agricultural, I think they all thought this lot sizes maybe needed to go down. That was sort of a discussion we had. And otherwise, they're hoping Twin Pine goes through. They just all really hope that goes through. It's a perfect spot for it, and it's ridiculous that we can't get that to happen. Okay,
That's
now on to the next work session, which I did not make also. And I don't know, that was with the planning board. And they talked and you listened?
Well, I did a little bit of an introduction more the second time, I guess from my perspective. I kicked off the meeting thinking they were in the right place, ready to start talking about it, because they'd had the packages for not quite a week, but a long time.
Yeah.
And they also do this kind of analysis in their own minds, and they're very thoughtful people. But I think maybe it was the hour of the morning or something, but it kicked off and took a while for people to say, well, now what are we supposed to do, and what are we supposed to comment on, and how do we comment on it? But I think it got going, and there was a lot of good debate. The number of points that were raised, we had some notes that were taken by Steve Whitman. Steve and Mark were here. We've also had a second work session, which I did a little bit better job of warming up people. I had some slides sort of get them thinking, and I'm not a morning person, so I'm not critical at all, please. So I would say that's a summary, a lot of good thoughts, and at the end, just to update you from my perspective, near the end of the second work session, the thought tended towards the direction of maybe we should consider cottage courts and institutional zones and not try to bite off too much for this coming vote. And that was, I mean, it wasn't a vote of it, but there was some reflection of that perspective. But other than that, a lot of good questions, a lot of thoughts and evaluation. Paul spoke a lot and a lot of participation.
I think that's great. I started watching one of the sessions, I can't remember which one, but again, it wasn't a group, it was just different people, were very confused about when the presentation of the different type of housing, but they all knew what a cottage court, everyone used that term. I don't know if that's because you had a big bat at that point and were beating him over the head with that, but I guess they related to that better than the high rise. They don't want the high rises. And I wasn't driving in a car and could say, see, that's a high rise. But their thoughts were that needed to stay, if we're going to do 2 or 3 levels, that needs to stay in the institutional.
Right, right. Well, that's good to hear. Any other thoughts?
I thought the planning board seemed very supportive and receptive, but they were doing the job that I think has to be done, and actually kind of segues into the communication strategy, and that is anticipating what objections there might be, and how do you put parameters around any zoning changes to mitigate those objections. So, there were some at the end of the second meeting about putting a cap on how many cottage courts you can have on any one lot. So somebody doesn't have a lot with 40 acres and decide they can put 40 clusters on there, right? That sort of thing. And also there was some expressed interest about how we, and it may be covered in existing zoning, which that's the part I wasn't so sure about, but what about, buffers and some of those sorts of things. But it was very much, we want to figure out how to make this work and make it palatable, which I thought was promising. That was my take.
Did you get that sense in both from the cottage court and the institutional?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good. Hi.
Hi.
We're
My apologies.
we're debriefing.
My apologies.
It's all right. You're here. Any other?
So, in saying that, another thing that popped into my mind was the general public doesn't know how planning and zoning gets changed. It just amazed me when I said, when you go and you flip over your ballot on the day that we vote, that's where the planning changes. And they said, and then they all weren't hung up on this, but this one woman particularly was hung up on, and is that where they're going to tell us what the house is going to look like? And I mean, so we did a great job putting houses up, but now they're confused if that's the house is going to, that type of house is going to go there. So just another sort of random thought that's circling my brain, but I'm glad that the planning board wants to do something, because there's so many things this year coming before the town.
Did each of you receive a copy of the notes that Steve Whitman had taken from the 2 work sessions? And there are a couple of comments that I added to it. Did everybody see those? I think we handed them out, didn't we?
These, October 31st, RP&D notes.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, yeah. And you have those on your email. But it's a 2-pager, just a simple document with bullet points, trying to capture, as Steve was trying to do, what some of the thoughts and considerations were. Again, there was no vote taken by the planning board. They were just trying out ideas and testing parameters, and so that's a pretty helpful document. Any other thoughts? Great. Well, that's helpful. Let's see. I will mention you. Let's jump to the schedule for a minute, just quickly. just so you're aware, and thank you for your patience, we're moving fast. Just to go back a little bit, we had the public forum on October 21st. We had the first planning board work session on October 31st in the morning. And then I'll update you on the League of Women Voters luncheon that Adam and I went to on the 12th. Did a slideshow and a long talk that was helpful. And then Friday, November 14th, we had the second planning board work session at 7:30 a.m. And now here we are today with our, what I call our commission meeting alone, just doing coordination. So in the future, we have the third planning board work session is November 21st. And that,
It's this Friday.
that's this coming Friday, right? Everybody on board? 7:30 a.m., rise and shine. And if it's necessary, the fourth planning board work session will be December 5th. So it takes a break because of Thanksgiving week, and that's also at 7:30 in the morning. And then the planning board meets alone, perhaps. Their schedule on the calendar, on the town calendar, shows December 9th is a meeting they've scheduled. This is their regular scheduled meeting. And then also, again, December 23rd as a 6:30 meeting they've posted, but we'll see. I plan to attend those, subject to deliberation that might be happening of what we're talking about here. So that's why it's on my calendar. But that's the review.
Adam, when do the warrant articles have to be in? I'm just trying to figure out that target date. January,
It's the first week of February. I think it's the Wednesday, the first week of February, that is the last day to deliver it to the town clerk. But we typically have things wrapped up before that, just with how the planning board schedule falls. So the first public hearing will be on Tuesday, January 13th, with a potential second public hearing on the 27th. But we have up until, I think it's that following Tuesday, to technically have our second public hearing.
okay.
Terrific. Everybody on board with that? Great. Well, the meat of this meeting, I thought, as I was reflecting, it's always good to be a step ahead in strategy, and so that we're aware of what happens next and also ready for what happens after that. I'm expecting that the planning board, through one other work session and maybe a fourth work session, will have given enough consensus and thought amongst themselves without voting, so that when they first meet alone, they will be ready to make a decision sometime in December. So once that happens, let's be positive, as we like to be, optimistic. I would anticipate we need to be ready to start to work on the next step, which is sort of the campaign of educating our community and ourselves, answering questions, promoting these thoughts. The one thing I would put out there is that we have to do this in sync with the planning board. These are thoughts and concepts that we put forward with the support of our consultants, and we are vested in them, of course, but we have to do it in sync with the planning board because essentially it's their article. So we'll do that. Kathy Weber has done a lot of public relations work in the past and sent me an email saying, hey, I'm thinking about this. How about if we put some pen to paper and have something we can reflect on by doing so? And so I suggested, put it on paper and let's talk about it. So you should have, and it's out there on the stage if you don't have one, a draft of what Kathy put forward, which is something to think about as far as a campaign strategy and how to communicate what we need to communicate. So Kathy, I'll turn it over to you, kind of walk us through this and let us know what you think and how it would work.
Sure. So obviously, this is contingent on the warrant articles that the planning board decides to hopefully move forward with. And we have to, to work from that, right? But my thought is, regardless of what they decide to move forward, assuming they move forward with something, there's a lot of different things that should be in motion to help make that work, and in terms of any kind of communications campaign, which is essentially what you're doing. So the first thing is messaging. What are you trying to say to people? And how do you say it so they can understand it? And already, I think it's obvious that there is a lot of confusion and misunderstanding around zoning and planning and building and all of that in general. So how do we make that something people can relate to and understand in simple terms? So I don't have the answers to that. I just threw out some of the types of things you want to think about in language, because how you say something is going to be as important as what we actually are proposing. So we'll want to come up with some key phrases for that. Whatever those might be, there's some samples here. We'll want to have an interpretive statement that came up at our last meeting with the planning board. So there's the legal language in the warrant article, but then putting that in simple English so people understand what that means. And along with that, and I didn't have it on here, but it should be, is an FAQ. And we do have the advantage of having a website for the Housing Commission. We could start an FAQ now, like you said. Well, if there's a zoning change, does it mean that everybody has to build that many houses on that lot, or has to build a cottage cluster if they have a lot in that zone? No. This is an option, right? So coming up with those questions that you're hearing in the community and then formulating very straightforward and direct answers and putting those up is something we could start anytime, regardless of what the planning board does. And I think that might be really, really helpful. And then once they have their warrant articles, we could work on an interpretive statement that basically says, okay, this is the warrant article for all you lawyers. This is what it means for everybody else, which I think is helpful. And then at the last meeting, we also talked about, and I think this is part of the reason cottage clusters have taken off and people are so receptive, is use of visuals. They saw that little picture of the little houses around the lawn, and they're like, well, that looks lovely. That would be fine, right? So how are we going to use visuals? How are we going to communicate those? How are we going to get them out? And then that's the next part. So once you know what your messaging is, then how do we get that information out? And Peter had mentioned in our last email that we have like $1,600 or something left in the budget. I don't know to what extent we can use that, but do we run informational ad in the Shopper, the Intertown Record? What about cable TV? There are 2 New London pages on Facebook. I don't know if there is on Instagram, but there are some other Instagram pages around town. Do we do flyers and put those up? Do we hold big meetings to take people's Q&A? Do we do small coffees? Do we do both? Those are all ways to kind of get the word out and engage people. And that's just pushing information out. And then the third piece of it is leveraging supporters. So people that have expressed a support for, for addressing our housing issue here in New London, whatever you call it, whether you call it workforce housing, attainable housing, et cetera. How do we engage them to make sure they're talking to people and putting it out there? And that includes the planning board, because it's going to be their warrant articles. The select board, hopefully, would be supportive. Business or community organizations that may support it. Both the hospital and the college attended the last 2 planning board meetings, and their leadership expressed support. Other local businesses, other nonprofits. I just shared with Peter some information that I received from Osmond Sargent, and they're talking about land conservation and supporting the need for housing, as the 2 go hand in hand. And so, who can we partner with? How do we do that? Are there other organizations or nonprofits who would be supportive? Certainly there's other businesses. When Twin Pines came up, It was one of the first public meetings I was attended, and I was so impressed with the business community supporting the need for housing that was, attainable housing, workforce housing, and some of those particular business leaders, how can we get them to help? Are their supporters willing to have their names published in the Shopper or the Intertown Record? A great way to garner support is to say, we're voting yes for warrant Article 7 and 8 because we believe attainable housing is critical to New London's future. Please join us. And then you list everybody's name who's willing to put it out there. That can be very, very powerful because a lot of people rely on what other people are doing to decide what they're going to do. And as along with that, a list of supporters willing to write letters of endorsement, on their own sort of thing, but knowing who those people are, asking if they will do them. This is relatively comprehensive. It may be too much for a town like New London, but these are all, it's just food for thought, right? Food for thought. So you could say, yeah, no way, this isn't gonna fly. We don't do this, this, and this. It's too much, but better to think some of it through and then decide, how we should go, what direction we want to go. So that's what I've got.
Yeah, it's all good thinking. Good food for thought. Just a couple of quick things. FAQs are really helpful, and we have a little bit of a seed for that in that from our third forum, there were 3 cards that were given to us, and I have my list of things to do to provide answers so that we could then put them on the website. But frankly, was so flat out with the schedule that we've had, I haven't drafted those, and I was going to send them to Steve and Mark and have them augmented and add them, and then all to you, and you can comment it. So we have some questions. I can send those out to you so you can see those. I would also add that storytelling is something that is very effective. It's something I've pounded on trying to build a list of people. It's very hard to find somebody to do that. But I think if we can do some storytelling in some sort of event, whether it be small or larger, that would be immensely helpful. The other thing that I've done just individually as a Housing Commission member is after our vote that occurred in March, in which we were turned down in much of our efforts, I reached out to people who were in opposition and had coffee with them. So really what we could be doing now, maybe not as a body, but individually, is don't just talk to people who support us. That's like believing in your own press. And I'm guilty of that as any. You feel good when you talk to people who like you, but it's important to talk to people who you think might be prepared to be in opposition, of course in a respectful and diplomatic way, but to understand where they are in these issues. And there's some people that I know I could reach out to individually as well. So those are 2. I was just thinking about your piece here, and it's very helpful, Kathy. Thank you. Just one other quick thing that occurred to me is that we all know that Blue Loon is selling their bakery, and hopefully that will end up in good hands. But it was started 7 years ago by Lori and Mike as a labor of love, something they wanted to do. And Lori was in one of our first panels of employers, in which we wanted the community to hear from some of the employers in town as to what the shortages of staff was, what it meant to not have staff because they don't have a place to live. And Lori was one of the panelists. So I was just thinking I could approach her as being sort of somebody who could be on a panel or who could help us in our mission.
I remember her from that first Twin Pines meeting, too. She was very articulate as well as passionate about the need. And that's, and that maybe even goes back up to key messaging is, defining the need, right? And making sure people understand that there's really a need. Because otherwise the assumption is, well, I have my house and I'm fine. What's the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's another piece.
I think that I would, I circled the word growth, and I decided that that shouldn't be in there.
Yep.
Should not.
Should not.
Yeah.
Lots of ways to talk about what needs to happen without using that word.
That's one of the no words.
That's one of the no words, I think,
Yeah.
with a lot of people. I mean, we all know what it means that we need, but just give it a different label. You know,
Yep.
like achievable, attainable, sustainable housing for all these people that
Right.
do all this great stuff, you know?
I feel like we need to have one thing somebody said to me is, what's the difference between the housing committee or commission and Path Home? The
The logo.
the logo, and I said, it was sort of a logo that was put together to get people to understand we're trying to deal with the housing situation, and she said to me, well, maybe that's a logo the Housing Commission should use. I'm thinking, well, it is ours, but people are not used to being this involved, and now that we've got some big things coming up, like what are we going to do about the highway department and et cetera, but they're more involved. But more importantly, I think we, as a group, need to come up with an answer for why are we worrying about this? We don't have water. I don't know what our pat answer should be, but we need to make it pretty similar if we can. I understand that the the zoning's not for today necessarily, but when they drive up and down the interstate to and from Florida or South Carolina or North Carolina, all they're seeing are these big developments going up, and it's terrifying them.
So fear, addressing the fear.
I'm reminded of something that Steve said in that last work session. I don't think you were here, Ann, but I think you would have appreciated it. He said something like, really very bottom line, basic language. It was something along the lines of, listen, you guys have a lot of things you could be doing. But if you don't do this much, you're not going to have anything. Now, I'm not saying it exactly the way he said it.
Oh, I remember that.
And I'm not saying he said it rudely. I'm certainly not trying to. What I'm trying to get across is a little bit similar to Ann in that people are sort of in la-la land. They hear stuff from us, and maybe it gets a snippet of their attention, but there's other things that happen, like the water and the dry cleaner and this, that, and the next thing. And so fighting for their attention, but not just repeating stuff that we've said to them before, because it does come down to the bottom line. We need to change the zoning. So the bottom line is, how are we going to affect that change? What is it that we're going to say that will give them the proper visual, the proper idea, without, as Ann says, being scared out of your tree that we're just going to have a blockbuster full of, for some reason, we're still here how many years later, and we still have to face this.
So why now is part of that question, right?
That's part of the question, and the other part is they want it to happen, but they don't want to see it.
Oh, hide it.
Somehow landscaping or
Yes.
tucking it in. When I said, well, we have the snow development down behind the college, what's the name of that road?
Cottage Lane.
Cottage Lane.
Yeah.
They didn't even know where it was. And I said, well, there's like 6 units down there with 4 apartments in each one. And they said, there's 24 units? That's the kind of mentality that's out there. They've never paid attention, and now we're asking them to.
Yeah, you know, we spent a lot of time with the planning board going over what we have in town. And I really feel like it's, I'm just hesitant that we repeat again the big A affordable, little a. We can't spend all of our time with data and getting them to see that we need this in that way, the way we already have done. It has to be similar to that meeting in which we're showing them what already exists and how that fits or doesn't, what's the word, conforming or non-conforming, which we have already, and showing people this came before, you know, just giving them that kind of idea, and then jumping off of that as to what does this mean now that you're asking me about this one thing that we're going to change. I don't know.
And to your point about buffering and landscaping and stuff, I think it's also important to help people understand what that does to the cost of a project. And so pushing development further into the site is more infrastructure to get in there, more stormwater to manage. Landscaping is not inexpensive. So also setting reasonable expectations around if we're trying to spur some small scale housing growth, it may not look exactly like what developments that were put in 20 or 30 years ago look like when it was a different development dynamic.
Well, there's a whole lot of people that are pretty horrified about the lot that was just cleared on Sargent Road.
That's what we were talking about before the meeting.
And my guess is they're all people who live on home sites that were once forested and there was trees cleared to build their house. And so change is hard, but it is necessary.
You have to drive down there to see that clear cut.
Drive where, I'm sorry,
You
can
have
you
to
be
drive
clear?
Down to Sargent Road?
Okay, yeah.
You can't, can you see it from Seamans?
No.
It'll be fine once there's a house built on it and it's graded. But people aren't used to seeing a lot of that, I guess. I don't know. I think it's
It was the clear cutting
Yeah.
that blew people away, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's,
they'll plant something. They'll have lawn or do something. I mean, they're not going to have stumps sticking up here and there.
Okay, well, we could spend time putting together the short list of phrases, but I think that might be kind of drafting as we go. I guess I would suggest that if we all start thinking about, make a list of these little phrases as you think about what would be effective when somebody talks to you and gives you a response. What do you think at that moment would be a phrase that would make them comfortable? And next time we meet, let's put that list together because that'll be immensely helpful. I would like to report on the budget.
Can I add one thing really quick, Peter?
yes, of
Sorry.
course.
Just on the Facebook social media item, I think we have to think about how that can be utilized from a government perspective. Social media is tough because we have to maintain a record as a government record. Yeah. So we have not really waded into social media purely because we have explored it as a town at different times and discussions with the New Hampshire Municipal Association and Town Council. It gets very complicated very quickly. So there may be ways to utilize it, but I think maybe we can have conversations over how that might be able to be, but other strategies may be more effective in an easier way than maintaining.
it may be as simple as saying, do you have questions about warrant articles 8 and 9? See the New London Housing Commission website page, right?
With its little logo.
With our little
Bring it down.
Pathways Home logo and a link to the page, right?
Yep.
It can be that, yes, I agree, you don't want to get into the weeds on social media.
What we've run
But
into
you can create
before,
awareness.
When we tried to use it for advertising before, the difficulty was you couldn't run an advertisement without having an account, and or it would run as a personal account for whoever it was that was using it. And so the town's policy at this point is to not even have accounts, period. And so then, because we looked at using targeted ads that were basically just that, not go to our Facebook page, but go to some external resource, but without having an account at all, it got very tricky. So, and I'll see if maybe there's been some workarounds and stuff that have come in since.
Yeah, the
probably a year
Recreation
ago.
Commission posts things.
And there's different, different levels of engagement maybe require than different paper trails and things, but.
Yeah, it's good warning. When I was working still in development, I had my own company. I looked into social media for doing some of the permitting work that I was doing. And what I quickly discovered was that once you start we probably won't be able to do this, but just as a caution, once you start to engage social media as a communication method, you open it up to a lot of people who sort of hide behind social media to throw a lot of things out there that become fact, even though they're not. And if you aren't right on top of it to try to answer it, it can quickly do you a disservice. So I struggled with that in my own development company and eventually kind of backed out of it because it wasn't going to work. And so we did it other ways. So any other thoughts? I cut you off. Okay.
I think the League of Women Voters was a great place because they all talked to a lot of people who would be not understanding a lot of things. And those people do vote.
Let me get to that in just one second. I just wanted to insert, regarding the budget, we do have about $1,600 or $1,700 left on the HOP grant that we will use that will be used up by our consultants as of our last meeting. So they will not be joining us in any more meetings. They kindly said, and by the way, they gave us a discount to cover what they needed to do as far as attendance. So they've already given us a big break. They did say that they would, of course, they're going to answer the phone. If we got questions, things they can do, they're here to support us, but there's no more money to pay for their consulting services. In our municipal budget, we have about $4,500 left in this fiscal year. So primarily for advertising or whatever little expenses we have. So that's good news. Because expenses add up. I mean, even Kelsey Clark, who does a terrific job for a very reasonable price, that cost us about $1,000 roughly for advertising in the Shopper, Intertown Record, and for her time for the third forum. So, round numbers, it adds up pretty fast.
The Shopper, I think the cost to the Shopper alone is like $500.
$550, $590.
Was that for a quarter or a half?
One full and then I think a half page. Okay. Yeah. We went all out on the third forum because it was the culmination.
And we need to save some money for advertising, advertising before the town meeting.
Yes. So we have $4,500 or so. We'll use it wisely. So if you think it's a good idea, let's keep our lists of phrases and marketing ideas, promotional ideas, and we'll do that. I want to keep moving because I don't want to keep you too long. Reporting in on League of Women Voters. We had a very nice luncheon and about 20 people there, give or take. Tom Venata was also there. His wife is a member, and he was there, and it was at Hilltop in their common room. We had slides, a slide deck I'd put together from some of the things that Steve Whitman had done and made up some of my own, and I think it went quite well. And we'll talk about one piece in particular at the very end, a slide that I made that is of interest. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I thought they seemed very supportive, very engaged. I didn't know a lot of them, but I think the ones that I didn't know might have been from the other communities, because I think there's 5 or 6 communities that were, I think Nancy said it was Warner, Sunapee, Newbury, Wilmot, New London, maybe? But it was very interesting to see how supportive and engaged they were.
Some good questions, nothing that we haven't heard before, but also I would say not elemental questions, things that are seeking clarity, but more the next step in their thinking, which was good. Very, very smart bunch. I'm not sure I reported back to you on the citizen committee presentation, did I? No, because, did I? Did I? Yes, yes, okay, I've reported back to you on that then, that's good. I also had a
But you
nice,
got good press.
oh, good, good, good. I don't seek a high profile, but we've got work to do, folks. I also had a nice coffee with President McCurdy at Colby Sawyer yesterday, just to sort of connect with him on housing. No big breakthroughs, but the takeaways I had were, and I didn't have any ask of him, it was more relationship, and to be available to him, to generally look for his support, and he was very supportive. He said it's probably the first or the second highest issue we have in attracting and keeping our professors. That's a huge statement. And he said, if there's, at the end, he said, if there's something I can do to help you, I'd be glad to help.
And that's a kind of quote that's great to have, like even in an ad with little statements from people who are supportive, right?
Yep, yep. He talked about the number of professors, maybe some administrative staff, I'm not sure, but certainly professors that were living in the dormitories they've converted, which they have, and that's
They've
pretty.
converted. They've actually are apartments. They're not having to share the bathroom with each other.
No, they've been converted, yeah. But still, it's a dormitories. Walk the vinyl hall, yeah, yeah. So anyway, he said we really, we support it. Is there anything else? We had a lot of discussion about education, which was fascinating, but not necessarily relevant to housing. So that's that report. The other thing I wanted to talk about, do you have this handout that I left up on the stage for you? One of the points I made, this is a chart that I was given permission to take from the SB2 study that was done. And it's a study, if you look at the numbers, of number of voters who voted by ballot and attended the open town meeting in various years. And if you look at the numbers I highlighted on the right, attending the meeting, the town meeting night, was only 9% of the population, average over 5 years. So 9% of the population is voting things that affect budgets for the whole town on that night. And as far as the ballot's concerned, it's 22.5%.
So are zoning changes voted on by ballot or at the town meeting?
Ballot.
Okay, thank you. I'm new to this whole thing.
But the numbers are staggering. If you play it out, it's 832 people on average determined the zoning change. So half of one more person than half is all that's needed to affect a change. 51%. Yeah, 51%.
Yeah, better than 2/3.
Right, right.
The bond issues occur at town meeting, not town voting. Right, 2/3. And this year, we're not having town meeting, well, not this year, but for March. My understanding is we're not having town meeting the exact Wednesday night after. Because of I would anticipate a bond issue is going to be so large, we need to be at Colby's auditorium, or basketball courts, or whatever you want to call it.
So it might be some other night other than the Wednesday
It's going to be a
after.
Wednesday night. A week later, we have to wait for their college break. So I think it's the 18th or something like that.
That's good to know.
The whole state has to vote on the second Tuesday for their town meeting, unless you're told you can vote in June or whatever month. There's a couple of towns that don't, but
You mean for the ballot? Yeah, so the ballot will still be
Tuesday.
Tuesday, and then a week from Wednesday will be
Yep.
the town meeting.
Yep, and the
But the
parking's
zoning
easier.
changes will be on the ballot.
Correct.
Okay.
And elections are on the ballot as well. So basically, all the dollar issues are at the open town meeting night. Yeah, all the money. Yeah, so, but
It's-
that was pretty staggering when I looked at how those numbers work out.
But that's also where people can make changes, is at the town meeting. Once you get onto a ballot, that's it. There's no open discussion the way there is at town meeting, which is always entertaining.
Anything else any comments on those items? No, good to know. Any other new business? Any comments, feedback? Current housing updates? Nothing, as far as we know, the Housing Appeals Board cases are still out there waiting for the Housing Appeals Board. These are the countersuits for the Housing Appeals Board decision, which was to grant Twin Pines the right of first refusal as on any new water that was discovered, and a soft recommendation to establish a freeze on water usage, right? Until more water was obtained. So that was pretty chilling, but that's been appealed by countersuits, and there's no new decision on that. Water Precinct, as of their last meeting, I think I attended the last one, but certainly one of the most recent ones, and the comment was made that the Water Precinct is now taking a look. The study that they had done to determine ways to extract more water from Colby Point essentially engaged in notions of reworking existing wells and drilling some other new wells in generally the same aquifer, the same location. Those are the two principles. And the Water Precinct at the last meeting, I believe it was the last meeting, certainly I attended it, said we're going to go back to the engineers and see if we can get recommendations for the most successful approaches to these items and try and get a price for doing those. In other words, not just do the whole thing for $5 million, but to do the low-hanging fruit and go at this one by one and work on first the things that we think will be the most successful. So that was good news. That's all I have on those items.
I do remember the meeting that was here, Jake C. saying, even if we start tomorrow, it'd be 3 years before we had more water. Just because of the permitting process, the whole thing.
But even if we make zoning changes tomorrow, it'd probably be at least 3 years before we'd have anything to move forward with.
That's the whole thing in a nutshell, right?
You know, we're sitting here saying that, who knows, the state is hot to have New London get some workforce housing or some other housing
I totally
here.
agree.
So don't be saying that it's going to take 3 or 5 years. It could move faster, it could move slower.
Sure. We did receive word that we have been designated as a housing champion, which doesn't mean,
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
not much with this current
What does
state
that
budget,
mean?
unfortunately. Previously, the Housing Champion program was established to identify communities who had put work into tackling the housing crisis, and then they would have access to grant funding that was set aside, was that 3 years ago, as part of the $100 million investment in housing. However, the program and all of the funding was axed from the last state budget. So oddly, the State Office of Planning still very much wanted us to apply. So back in the spring, I submitted the application knowing that the budget was not going to include it. So frankly, I thought it was dead at that point, and I was sort of taken by surprise when we got the email a few weeks ago saying that we have achieved the designation. So I don't really know what it means going forward, to be totally honest. They do want to come and present us this designation, so we'll keep you guys informed. I think at this point, I think it's the State Office of Planning trying to prove that it's a worthy program, that hopefully not this year, because the budgets at the state level obviously are on a 2-year rotation, but a year from now, that it merits investing in the program again. So for right now, I don't think it provides us a lot of opportunity, but there's hope that it comes back down the road.
On the state level, is there any chance, like the ADU legislation that came through, that the state could mandate affordable housing like has happened in other states? So in other words, doing nothing could end up hitting us on the backside if there's a mandate and we haven't already taken action?
Mandate meaning that we have the proper regulations on the books for workforce housing? or
Mandate that we have to
actually-
build X number of units based on our population, housing stock, available land. I mean, that happens in other states. I mean,
Yeah,
Peter,
it's-
you might know, I know from New Jersey, and it was a very hot issue, but the
Yeah.
state mandated it.
Maybe a set aside within developments. I don't know that I would see New Hampshire going to the lengths of, like, I think New Jersey has a mandate like that where the community has to, whether a developer comes along or not. That doesn't seem like New Hampshire's typical, I mean, who knows? Who knows? I don't know that we can predict anything at the government level these days, but that seems unlikely. I could see them going to the point, and we have that on the, as far as a regulation like the ADU for workforce housing, that's been on state law since 2009. So we have to provide reasonable accommodations in more than 50% of the town for realistic implementation of workforce housing. And so the use of realistic is tough because no matter how inclusive your ordinance is, if you're somewhere with a high land cost, how realistic is it really? And so, you know, I think our ordinance is the best it can be, but at the end of the day, land is expensive. And so we first implemented that in 2009, and we updated it in 2019, sometime in the recent.
19 or 20,
Okay.
yeah.
So we've stayed up to date on the regulatory side. As far as forcing local governments into actually constructing, doesn't seem like the New Hampshire way, but who knows these days?
Yeah, I can just brief you quickly on, in Massachusetts, there's a Chapter 40B. Chapter 40A, by the way, is the empowering act for all development, all planning boards in the state, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So 40B was created, that's how important it is, which says that every community must have at least 10% of affordable housing. And if I can switch to my developer hat for a moment, that's a huge cudgel in dealing with a town on a development that you want to do for residential. The first thing you do is you map out a yield plan on workforce housing of 100 and 200 units. The neighborhood goes crazy, and then you say, okay, we'll do market rate, but you have to give us more than what we would have had otherwise. And it's just it's a huge lever that developers use. So I would add, however, there is currently a committee formed by the legislature which is looking at the zoning empowering capability of the towns to see if they should be so empowered to establish and work on their own zoning. A committee that's reviewing whether we should be empowered to control our own zoning. That's serious business.
Or whether the state does it, is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the inference is the towns can't do it, maybe we should do it. So that's scary.
Does that mean that if you're, does that mean that the town is then responsible for getting a developer to do something, and the town doesn't pay for it, or the town, like, how does that?
Well, the mechanism works that if the town has not met in Massachusetts, if the town has not met the 10%, then the developer is entitled as of right to build a number of units at a certain much higher density. As of right.
But
So-
how do you get the developer to do it anyways?
Because there's huge profit,
Okay.
yeah. So there's a piece of land, residential, you can build 100 units. Workforce housing, you could build 150, let's say. You'd go to the town and say, I'm going to build 150 workforce housing or affordable housing, and the town and the neighborhoods scream, and then you say, okay, well, we'll do 125 market rate and 5 affordable or something small. Put my hat back on. Okay, I promise to keep this moving, and I think that's it. Any other comments? I have not scheduled another meeting because we have another work session You know what the schedule is, and I'll try not to send you too many emails, but this is an exciting time. Think about Kathy's suggestions on ideas for our communication strategy, and
The other thing I think we should start thinking about and writing down, and you've had some already, let's put in writing the questions that we're getting, so we can do our FAQ thing. What are you hearing, what are people asking? Because to me, that's almost more critical.
yep. And I can be, without breaching the open meeting laws, I can be the aggregator of things that you hear. So if you hear an idea or something that you want to be sure not to forget, send it to me. I can't comment on it. We're not going to have a big discussion about it, but I will aggregate them for another meeting if you'd rather do that. And you can also copy Kathy as well, just so that we're on the same page. That's okay to do. All right? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Any second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.